In the studio, we have Sam Broughton, the Mayor for Selwyn and the President of LGNZ. Welcome to the show, Sam. It's a pleasure to speak with you today.
Yeah, good, Blake.
So tell us a bit about both roles, I guess, to begin with. Tell us a bit about your roles and a bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm the Mayor of Selwyn District. It's a role that I've had for the last 8 years and a wee bit. I was on council for 6 years from 2010 till 2016 and became the Mayor in 2016. I love serving the community. It's a community that I grew up in. My family's here. My parents and brothers still live on the family farm out near Darfield. And I really enjoy that we have some challenging things to do as communities, and councils are the places where good people come together, assess the range of views that there are in a community, think about the benefits, both short-term and long-term, and try and make good decisions. And I've been the president of local government New Zealand now for 18 months, coming up 2 years. And I really enjoy that role. It's an extension really of being the mayor here. There's so much that I get to see and do and support behind the scenes for councils across Aotearoa. But councils, we like to think that we're all different, but we're all quite the same as well. There's so many good people involved in local government, all trying to do the best for their communities, all working with government changes and legislation, changes in culture around the country, around what's acceptable and not to spend public money on. It's a brilliant role. I encourage anyone to with a passion for their local community to think about running for council with elections later this year.
If I may, let's start with your local government president's role. So we saw a very controversial speech from the sitting Prime Minister. I think it was last year at the last conference, and it raised a few eyebrows. Have you had a good relationship with the Prime Minister, and did you have any individual opinions on the speech?
Yeah, I meet with the Prime Minister regularly as part of my role as president of LGNZ, sort of quarterly meetings with him, and one's coming up soon. He understands and can see what the pressures are on communities across New Zealand, and I think some of the flow over of what New Zealanders expect the government to be doing. He expressed his views here about what he would like councils to do. I think in that there's the need to reflect that councils aren't elected or appointed by the government of the day. They're elected by the same communities that put government in place. We're elected just like central government politicians, and we will make decisions in the best interest of our community at the time. It was interesting, his comments. I think that some of it was more of a reflection on what needed to be said to New Zealand rather than what necessarily needed to be said to the room, and missed a whole lot of facts around the hard work that local government has done across Aotearoa New Zealand to look to lower rates, to look to focus spending. And I know that in my district we spend 86% of our capital spend is on water infrastructure and roading, so that only leaves 14% for rubbish, some community services buildings, some pools and anything else that council does. So in my experience, councils are very focused on serving their communities and spending rates income really wisely.
Mm-hmm. And lastly on this batch of questions, what about your relationship with the in turn with the local government minister? We recently saw a change there with Simon Watts from Simeon Brown. So have you had a relationship with both ministers?
Yeah, it was good to have a relationship with Simeon Brown in the first 12 months of the new government, and we had really sort of key focuses for him, and he was very clear on this with transport and water, and that was the work that he did. In the change, and now having Simon Watts as our minister, we have an existing relationship with him because he had been the previous spokesperson for the National Party when they were in opposition, 3 or 4 years ago, and had lots of engagement with him around the water changes, the three waters, and that conversation over the last 3 or 4 years. He's also been the Minister for Climate over the last 12 months, so he's had good interactions across Aotearoa over that time, and really pleased that he's been made our Minister. He has also brought in, as well as the water and wastewater and transport conversation, he's really focused on regional deals. And yeah, it's pleasing to see his engagement with us. He turned up at the last All of Local Government meeting, which we host at the end of February. And his conversation there was he wants to see the end of this parent-child kind of relationship between central and local government, and wants to see us work as partners around the same table. And that's music to the ears of local government across the country, because we know all the good things that we do for our community, but local government only collects 1/10 of the public money that central government collects, and so much of that decision making and funding does go to central government. So we need to make sure that the relationship isn't 90-10 in the same way that the money is 90-10.
I was actually looking over a report that LGNZ released, I think it was towards the end of last year, in terms of spending. And as you mentioned, you get 10% of all money essentially that gets paid into by ratepayers, taxpayers for that kind of public service spend. There's a couple of recommendations that were in there about ways to fix that inequality of funding, like government paying GST on rates and paying property rates on properties that they own. For you guys, that would be a lot of dockland, and I think it's defence land as well, down that way as well. How much of a difference would it make to the finances that you've got to juggle to have that kind of income put back into where people are spending it?
So councils at the moment are really constrained in the amount of funding and the ways that we can fund councils. So rates and debt are really the only avenues that we have. Some councils have a little bit of an investment. It might be in a local port or in an airport, but not every council has those. And then councils have user charges. So if maybe it's around libraries or pools or signing up for local classes and those sorts of things, but rates and debt are the two main ways. We have advocated for a new funding approach to local government. So rates is going to continue to be a significant part of that picture, and so will debt, because debt means you can charge for things. We put pipes in the ground that last for 50 plus years. So we want those that benefit from those pipes to pay for them. It's not really fair that everyone today pays for that and the benefit is just received for free over the next 50 plus years. But our funding tools that we raised, there was 25 of them. And of those 25, the things you raised around rates and the GST on rates, or the Crown paying rates on their land, and that could also include education facilities and others that you mentioned, they're in a pocket that I'd say the government is uninterested in. So we had 3 tiers. The first tier was things that the government is talking about and actively pursuing. The second tier was things that government is talking about, but we're not seeing a whole lot of active, trying to make that a reality. And the third is things that local government would want that local government's not interested in. So those rating ones you've talked about sort of fit into the last category. But in the first category, the GST on new builds would be a thing that the government is talking about. They have put it in the coalition agreement. We would love to see that come back to councils. It would provide an incentive for councils that need to grow. At the moment, a huge amount of the growth is sort of a cost to the existing community, because there's things which fall on the infrastructure, but the benefit of that growth is all in the income tax and the business tax that's collected, and all that goes back to central government. So the GST on new builds would be a step that would help. We've also talked about the mineral extraction royalties. So again, that's something the government has talked about, and it's part of their regional deals framework. Mineral royalties are currently collected and go back to central government. We think that if some of that was given back to local councils, again, there's an incentive to think about the activities that go on in a district and the impact that is caused in those districts to be funding things locally as well. We've also talked about congestion charging, levies and tolls on roads, which we know the government has talked about as well, visitor levies. All those sorts of things are in the much more likely to happen in the short term. So,
Is there?
sorry, just to finish that, Paul, I should just say I don't think there's a one or two silver bullets as a key replacement. There's a number of new tools that I think local government needs.
There was that big report that was done, started under the Labor government and then finished up and thrown out by Simeon when he was minister, around the future of local government. Do you think that and I know that they're looking at tweaks now anyway, Simon's come in and said, yeah, we're going to make a few changes along the way. Do you think that there's an understanding with the public as to how important the role of local government actually is to their day-to-day lives and how it could be changed or improved?
No, I think there's very poor understanding across New Zealand about what councils do for communities. I don't think my knowledge was very good until I got on council. I think lots of people stand for election thinking one thing and then realising within a few months that actually what the council does is it might be that, but it's also all of these other things. So everyone that walked or drove or cycled to work this morning on a road or footpath that was provided by the council, brushed their teeth, flushed the toilet, had a drink of water, went out for dinner over the weekend to a place that was licensed by their local council, played sport or dropped their kids off at a park that was provided by their local council, had held a birthday party at a local playground. You know, there's so much that councils do, and I don't think that's very well understood. That was part of the Future for Local Government report, was saying that New Zealand could do with civics training. And I think that should start from primary school to actually understand what goes on at a local council level. I'm visiting all my local schools at the moment, so we've got over 30 schools in Selwyn, just spending an hour with each and talking to teachers and students and board members about the relationships, I suppose, between schools and councils. Schools are the place where communities are formed. You know, kids create lifelong friends, parents meet other parents, and the education that we receive at school, I think there's something that needs to be in the curriculum about civics education. That would be hugely important. I don't think it's quite true that the government has thrown out the Future for Local Government report. They just said they were not going to drive the change. They were pleased to see the results, but wanted local government then to pick up some of the change and move it on. And I think that one of the big things for us is the need to not dismantle local government by multiple reforms. And there's water reform and there's RMA reform and there's things that have major changes on the shape and size and structure of councils and the responsibilities that councils have, without taking into account what's the right size and shape of local government for New Zealand. And we haven't had that level of conversation yet. And I'm a little bit, I'm very aware that changes for water and RMA will fundamentally change the shape of councils into a space that we might not have wanted to otherwise go if we had a much more global conversation about the size and shape and functions of local government that New Zealand needs. Is the model from 1989 still fit for purpose? And in some places it might be, and in other places I don't think it is.
In terms of that civics education and people not understanding the role of local government and those changes that we see coming through from central government that gets passed on to you guys, do you think that feeds into the declining rates of people actually getting involved in local body elections?
Yeah, we've got pretty poor turnout for local body elections. At the moment, Mayor Nick Smith, he's Mayor of Nelson, is leading a piece of work to try and understand electoral reform for local government. That's looking at the voter turnout. It's talking about the way that we vote. At the moment, each council has its own contractor to sort out how it runs elections. So neighbouring councils could run elections quite differently from one another, promote them quite differently, and have different processes for voting. We think there should be I think there should be a standard process, in a paper that Nick's putting out has talked to this, a standard process across Aotearoa New Zealand. That means everyone understands the way that you vote and engage. I also think that the voting system that we've got for local government, which is postal voting, is old. It's no longer the way that we should be voting. I'm not sure of anyone younger than me that sends letters, to people. A pen and paper is not the native way of learning to write and learn now. We all learn on screens and digitally. So I think we need to explore ways of doing that. And the central government election still has a really good turnout with in-person voting. So I think we should look at all of the options that are in front of us.
Are there any other sort of factors that you think might lead to why people don't engage with local body elections?
I think elected member safety is one of those things. Elected members take a bit of a hard time and criticism from their community. That is part of the job. But I think recently, and we've seen from elected members and continue to hear reports of more and more abuse, whether that's in person, physically, verbally, and online. And that means that it doesn't feel like it's an overly safe place to be sometimes for people, and that turns people off. I also think the pay for local government elected officials, elected members, is too low to encourage the best people in our communities to put their hands up. Traditionally, it's been a space where older people and those with enough money in the bank to not need the income from being on council can put their hand up. And then others from time to time, as their job is flexible or they feel a real passion in their community, or their spouse has a job that can support the family, or it's a single person who's able to make their own independent decisions. But they have traditionally, I think, been a bit more one-off. And I would love to see councils that truly reflects the community makeup. And to do that, I think we need to change the way we pay elected members. There's still obviously the public good aspect and public service side to it, and people want to, I think, see that continue. So it's not that you pay people in the same way that you might pay professional boards and people who are working on those full time. But the responsibilities that we have, my council, has over $2 billion worth of assets that I'm responsible with my councillors for making sure we make good long-term decisions for. And I think most people, when they stand for council, aren't thinking about that long-term asset management. We tend to be thinking about the thing I want done in my community right now, and it's both. But we need good people to put their hands up, and at the moment, pay does not encourage the best.
One of the things that's going to be cornering this year's local body election as well across the country is going to be Māori wards, after the choice of the government to take that back to referendum for electorates or for areas that chose to go through with creation of Māori wards without putting it to a referendum first. Do you think there's a risk there of that issue overshadowing other community issues that each community might be facing when it comes to the election?
In some places, it certainly will, and not everywhere has a Māori ward. So, in those places where it does, then that will become more of a conversation than in other places. I think just Māori involvement in decision making is something that all councils should be doing. The Local Government Act talks to us about how we must continue to increase Māori participation in decision making. In the South Island and in my own council, our local runanga and Ngāi Tahu have a position where they don't want Māori wards, and so we have created seats on our council and on our standing committees for mana whenua participation in those roles without the need to have a Māori ward. But for those places that do, this year's election is not only, or the members standing for election are not only fighting for the election result itself, but also for the existence of that seat in total. And so there's a lot of pressure on the elected members that currently fill those seats and also those looking to stand at this year's election.
As we move on to your position a bit more as a mayor of Selwyn, as you move into a local body election, have you seen a good uptake in the people interested to be on the council? I know it's the other end of the question we've just been talking about, but have you seen any interest at all yet?
Yes, I have. There have been people who have talked to me about wanting to stand for council and interested in what the role looks like. And I would encourage anyone considering that. I know it's only March and it seems like October's a long way away, but it's a major change for an individual or a family to think about making that decision. And it's not a sort of decision you want to make in 3 weeks when nominations open. So if people are considering that at the moment, I'd encourage them to reach out to other elected members that they know. I do know that you might not want to talk to the elected member that you want to stand against. So you need to think about who else can you talk to in that space. And if you want to understand more about what it means to stand for council, then LGNZ is putting together some work that will help people understand what it means to be on a council, and we want to make that available to people before they make the decision to stand. So when they get on council, it's not learning from the ground floor on the first day, but there's some training that can be put in already. And we have professional development as an organisation for all of our members. And so this would be something that would be an extension to that and be made freely available to the community.
And I assume you're planning to stand again?
Yes, yeah, I'll be standing again this year.
So with that then, how do you try your best to balance your two roles? Your role as the president of the local government and the mayor of Selwyn. How do you find the effort to balance that with your two roles and your family and everything else?
Yeah, they're two big roles, and I enjoy them both. My family is very important to me. Went swimming a couple of times over the weekend. Had my mother's birthday yesterday, and so making sure that I have time in my diary for them, and that those things come first. And family is so important. I continue to say that with the people that I work with as well. Health and family need to come before the job and the role. But as far as balancing the work between the mayor and president of LGNZ, there were many other roles that I had when I was the mayor without being the president. So I was the chair of the Canterbury Mayoral Forum. I ran some work to look at tourism around the South Island. I was the chair of Zone 5 and 6, which is the South Island councils, and ran their meetings and being together. And I was the deputy president of vice president of LGNZ with that as well. So when I became the president, I stopped all those other roles, and that filled up that space that was there. I think that when you do a role for a while, and I'm the sort of person who enjoys learning and also needs a bit of a challenge and thinking about what's next in extension, when I became the president of LGNZ, that helped me think about how do I grow as a person, how do I learn different perspectives, how do I continue to be challenged in my own points of view. And I think I love seeing leaders who can change their mind. And so I've enjoyed the role of being able to travel around and meet other councils and hear different perspectives than I would have otherwise heard if I'd just been the mayor of Selwyn.
And with that, there was understanding whether you would or would not stand again. So how did you finally come to that decision that you would stand?
Yeah, I talked with my family about the commitment that's there. I've got a daughter at primary school at the moment, so we yarned and had a chat about what the roles mean at the moment, and decided that it was the right thing to do for our family at the moment for me to continue in this role.
Great. Anything else for you, Paul?
Yeah, one last question, and it is kind of an election question. What would you describe your vision for Selwyn being 10, 15 years from now?
I want it to be a great place that my daughter loves and is passionate about. So good for those young people that I know are growing up here, that they can be proud of. As I did, I grew up here and loved this place. But also we're the fastest growing district in the country. And so there's something special about Selwyn that people want to come to and be in. And that's New Zealanders moving here. So what do we currently got that's special that needs to be protected and looked after so that continues? While also thinking we can't just stay the same. 2010 Selwyn with 40,000 people is very different than 2025 Selwyn with 85,000 people. And in about 12 years' time, we'll be the same size as Dunedin. So how do we do future in a really coherent way? That means as we transition and change and pick up the energy of those that are moving here because they want all that change to happen and are looking forward to the opportunity that's here, how do we harness both sides of optimism for the future, for families, for business, as well as looking after the environment, relationships with mana whenua and our young people who can stay, thrive, travel, and want to come back and raise a family here too.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Sam. It's been a pleasure to speak with you, and please stay with us.
Thanks, Blake. Thanks, Paul.
Hey, thanks for checking out today's video. Make sure you like, share, subscribe so you get more updates as we go along. We deal with these guys for the rest of the year.